Welcome to the A&R Worldwide podcast presented by Nuplak with your boy Taylor Jones here as your host. This is the Executives in Discussion podcast where we talk to experienced executives and creatives. We dive into their journeys, ups and downs, the state of the business, where they see it going, and of course gathering some priceless advice and key takeaways. If you're in the music industry or you're looking to get your start in the music biz and want to hear from the very best, this podcast is for you. Senior Vice President and Head of A&R at Red Bull Records, Kenny, aka Tick, joins me today, finding his calling in music as a journalist and A&R at DreamWorks, Epic, and most recently Warner Records, where he signed the likes of Wiz Khalifa and three-time Grammy-nominated artist and producer Terrace Martin. Kenny now oversees all A&R activities, including procuring artists and executives and launching new initiatives at Red Bull Records. He's a veteran in the business, but current as ever, and an all-around cool guy. I'm looking forward to this discussion, so let's get into it. Kenny, known as Tick. What's up, bro?
My G, thank you. Thank you for taking this on, my guy.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Last time I saw you was about a year ago, and we shared a panel together.
We did.
Talking about the landscape of A&R, and boy, has it come along.
It's come along. So much has happened in a year.
Yeah, so much has happened in a year. And you would know better than most on the planet because you're Senior Vice President of A&R at Red Bull Records, which means you work with established artists, new artists that you guys develop, artists that you pair up with the branded side of the business. It's, just really, really diverse from how Red Bull operate. I'd love to know a bit more about the role and the types of artists that you're working with, that you're excited about.
Amazing.
Yeah, tell me
Amazing.
more.
Thank you so much for having me, first and foremost.
Thank you for being here.
I'm a fellow creative, but I'm such a fan of your work.
Thank you. Likewise.
You're such a champion of artists, and I think it was so important to hear your story as well. So I think it kind of, you'll identify with the role, because as head of A&R and Senior Vice President of Red Bull Records, when you take on that role, you work for a very cool brand.
Yeah.
But I can only speak to the record label side. And what's amazing about the record label is Red Bull does cool shit, just to be blunt.
Yeah,
and you probably grew up on it, as most people did.
Yeah. Well, with the pace that we work at, you kind of need Red Bull. Shout out to Red Bull. You know what I mean?
No, that's real. That's real.
Yeah.
But with Red Bull Records, our mantra is signing culturally impactful artists.
Yeah.
Artists that make a cultural impact. So you'll see on our roster, we have Albert Hammond Jr. from The Strokes. And then we have an incredible, iconic artist like Blast, who just did 2 Palladiums, and he's about to do Coachella next month.
I was a big fan of his record with Ty.
I was going to say, from the jump. I remember us speaking about that a year ago.
But I bumped that song in my car. That was my driving song.
Chosen.
Chosen. It was so good.
It's magic how that came together. And that was an artist, this is a perfect example of my role. That was an artist that wasn't signed through research. That was true development and belief, which is great to hear, right? And that's where you get the real.
Still not enough of it right now.
No, exactly. And then we have the Aces, and then we have Wonder Girl imprint called Wonder Child that we do with.
I actually think the Aces were a client of ours at one point. I think we were touring them.
That is wild.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm 100%.
I'm going to check, and if it's not, then I'm going to just remove this clip. But I'm almost positive.
No, I believe it. And you look at that band. We saw that band play in front of 10 people at a train station in LA, and then a sold-out show in Provo, Utah. And then you go from there to seeing them sell out a massive venue like the Wiltern. And that band, that's the joy I get of working for an indie label with the resources of almost a major label.
Yeah.
With Red Bull Records being a part of Red Bull. Greg Hammer, who's the managing director, always said, we have to do right by the artists. We have to service these artists. We're in the servicing business, right? So I feel the same way. I feel like we have to service the artists.
It's great to hear that, because so much A&R comes from a different perspective. And actually, a lot of the A&R that I'm used to comes from a different perspective too. I'm in the mindset of servicing artists and servicing creatives. That's really what's important to me, having been and still am a creative. But spending the last 7 years working in K-pop, where the artists aren't really serviced as much as the labels are, because they choose the records and fabricate the songs, and the treatment of the video and the brand and the personification of what the group will end up becoming is all preset prior to the members of the group even stepping into the studio and recording. So it's a completely flip side of things. So it's really, really nice and refreshing to hear that there are still A&R executives that are working on enhancing the artist vision and supporting the creativity that is innately what makes music so great. And it's what gravitates people to music, is the soul and the emotion and the truth and the authenticity in music, which we really can only establish truly from an artist's lens and point of view if the artist is in the driving seat. So it's really nice to hear that part of your mantra is supporting that and building the team that helps champion that vision.
Exactly. I mean, we always say it, like, we're champions of the arts and the artists, right? And we really are there to protect their vision, preserve their vision, and get it forward. It's the truth. I know I could look at myself in the mirror and know that day we did an honest day by that artist. We really fought the good fight, as you did, and you continue to do. The same thing when Blast, when CB on my A&R team had first played me the music, we looked at each other and we were so excited and we went after that. And when it came time for his deal to be up and we had to re-sign him again, the artist and his team, Eagle, who are an incredible team, shout out to Carl and Vic, they both were like, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And going back to what Greg had said, because you share the same, I think the same will that we have to work with artists. Yeah. Greg said, listen, we have to do right by these artists across the board. We have to, if we can't knock it out of the park, what are we doing? And I love that. And that's the way that's why I joined that team.
Either you commit and you go all the way, or don't bother.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the way you leaned in on K-pop. It's like what you were touching on early. We touched upon it before this interview. I said, what was that like? And you said, I was getting laughed at buildings.
I was getting laughed out of buildings, and we can talk about it. The way that happened, I was representing a producer-writer duo. Actually, a guy called Carlos Beatty, who's renowned in the business. He's a Grammy Award-winning record producer and songwriter who did Flowrider for Sugar for Flowrider and Revolver for Madonna, won a Grammy for that, and Eeny Meeny for Bieber, all these big records back in the day. And he was a friend of mine. I was his manager for a while, and he had a record that got onto GOT7's project called Just Right, and the record blew up, and I think it went 5 or 6 times platinum, and was one of their biggest ones to date. And that kind of got me into the world of opened my eyes to K-pop, and then I started placing records in K-pop. And this was really, really early on, and so early that in fact, when Hype Priley was called Big Hit, and we started going back and forth on briefs, we landed a couple of records on BTS's first album that went platinum in America, and then the second one, and then many others. And so during that time, I actually had the ambition to start a publishing company, and I went to UMPG, and of course I have very, very dear friends of mine. Of course, Evan, who's become a very, very close friend of mine, and shout out to Evan. He is really becoming a mentor and a great friend. And every single one of the majors, but ultimately it was a little too early. And the method of which in which I wanted to start the publishing company had a different mechanism for paying out partners and pitching partners and A&R, because over in that market, partners who place music for you have taken sub-publishing as a means of commission. And sub-publishing isn't designed to be a means of commission. It's designed to collect revenue in a country where you don't have the means as a publisher to collect revenue, and so you sub-publish, right? Got it. But now it's a means to collect commission. And so this entire infrastructure happened, and none of the majors said, we're not going to pay any other partners sub-publishing commissions in local markets. We have our own branch there. We'll collect our own money. It's not about that. It's about other partners who you work with and collaborate with in an ecosystem like that help you place records. And we never got the luxury with most of the big companies to explore that until we signed with Sony. And a really, really good friend of mine called Niels, who's now was the MD of Sony Music Publishing in Benelux for about 10 years, who now is over at Warner Chappell, and he's the president of Warner Chappell and Warner Records in Benelux. Great friend of mine. He gave me a deal at Sony Music Publishing, and he said, I'm going to figure out how we can pay overrides to A&R partners and pitching partners and build this infrastructure. And so we ended up building a publishing company that has like 9 publishing companies for the price of one, because we've got all of these other companies that we're able to pay and reward for their work and put them on the P line, whether or not they're the publisher, because if they've had a part in it and they deserve that credit, we want to reward them. So it was really good, but it took a lot of hard work, and people laughed me out of rooms for a while. And now we're 100 plus number ones and 50 many #1 placements on the Billboard chart and many other. It is great. And I appreciate it. But sometimes it takes like real fucking persistence.
Persistence and belief. But I love that. And I was so attracted to that in your story when we did that panel a year ago.
Yeah.
I felt like we were kindred spirits in it just because I just related to that so much in my journey and why I joined Red Bull Records and why I wanted to just be around like-minded people, like what you're doing here with your company. You just wanted to be around like-minded people. And
good people, cool shit. Good people, cool shit.
Great people, cool shit.
Exactly.
And that's such a great way because that story you just said was incredible. I think people hearing this would find that invaluable.
Thank you.
You just pushed.
You have to innovate, and if you can't find a path forward, you have to build your own and forge your own. And that's, it's always how I've operated. And I want to talk about your background.
Please.
Because, being SVP and head of A&R at Red Bull Records, let's talk about how you got to that position.
100%.
Because that doesn't come out of nowhere, and it takes a long time, and it takes a seasoned executive that's had a lot of experience and is well respected and has built relationships over the course of their career in order to achieve that. So where did this all begin for you?
I think it started, I wanted to be a journalist when I was a kid. My dad was in the military.
Okay.
And my mom was really artistic, and I just had no inroads in the music business. I grew up in a suburban town hours outside of Los Angeles, the city. So there was no reference point of how you even break into the music business. And I didn't even know there was a music business, to be blunt with you.
When you're young, you listen to music on the radio, you think it's just magically there.
It's just magic. And just these artists appear, they're a voice, and you see them on TV, and you're just like, they're magic. I love that, the way you just said that.
But that is the juxtaposition between the public and artistry, right? And
100%,
that's what we do professionally, is build up that hype and that momentum and that perception between the two so that we can then monetize it, which is really ironic and funny when you're on the flip side.
When you're on the flip side, it's so pure and innocent as a listener. And that's what I was. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to write for, a skateboard magazine or a hip hop magazine. I was obsessed with hip hop and punk rock music because to me, they were so angsty and just what a suburban kid wants. They want something dangerous. They want something to break out of your parents' 9-to-5 jobs that they work. That you want to kind of ruffle feathers. You want to, this is the quintessential rise of an Avril Lavigne. Well said. Right? No, in a perfect fucking example. Yeah. It's so like as a kid.
Or Green Day.
Yeah. So for me as a kid growing up, a lot of my friends were skateboarders, graffiti artists, in punk bands. A lot of my friends were hip hop artists, just people that I just wanted to surround myself around, and I wanted to write about them and tell their stories. And God bless my father. He passed a year and a half back. But
sorry for your loss.
Thank you so much. Shout out to my dad, Henry. But he was so encouraging. He said, "Listen, you're going to be broke being a journalist, but I love you. Let's just keep the passion."
It's funny that he didn't know that you also could be broke in the music business.
Exactly.
Which is 99% of the people.
100%. And what happened was I had met a guy named Bob Mack, who was a journalist for Spin.
Yeah.
And Bob introduced me to a woman named Miwa Okamura. I was late in my teen years, in between my junior and senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting an internship. This is crazy.
At Spin?
At Grand Royal Records for the magazine in Atwater Village. And Grand Royal Records, if anyone doesn't know, that's the Beastie Boys record.
Yeah.
So I meet them in between two incredible album cycles. I meet them between Ill Communication and Hello Nasty. So they weren't in the office when I interviewed, but when I interviewed, it was an incredible thing because the Beastie Boys set up their office to be a basketball court and a skate ramp and a studio upstairs in Atwater Village. And downstairs was the record label. They also ran a magazine during that time. And it was just such an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, that sounds like my kind of vibe.
Exactly. It was just like so punk and so hip hop and so rebellious. And
honestly, it kind of speaks to like Branson starting Virgin.
Exactly.
Also, the magazine, the studio, the recording, things all in one.
But you see, you're a student of the game. You see, not many people would.
I'm a student of Phil and Branson.
100%. You could tell. Only somebody who knows that, or XL Recordings, you would know that.
Yeah.
So Miwa and the team at Grand Royal took a liking to me. Shout out to that entire team of that era, and I became their intern. I was like their kid on the streets, like doing college radio, working for the magazine, running up and down the steps.
Respect.
Showing up, sweeping floors, working for free for over close to a year, going to night school. And my dad, this is why I brought up my dad, he drove me to my first interview at Grand Royal. My first interview in the music business, late teens, my dad drove me and we got lost. because we didn't know where Atwater Village was.
So did you arrive late?
No, I arrived on time, but we were lost. I was nervous. I go in there, I nail it. I get the internship, and all of a sudden I would drink 7-Eleven coffee or soda this big at the 7-Eleven on Rowena, which is still there.
I can see how we've evolved to Red Bull now.
You see, this is the precursor, exactly. This is the precursor. So I used to drink 7-Eleven coffee or soda in like a super big gulp size, and the 7-Eleven's still there in Rowena, and I used to run up and down the steps of the Beastie Boys recording studio, and Mike D and the whole people, and everyone at Grand Royal would laugh and say, Kenny, you're so hyper and bugged out, you're like a little tick. And that's how Tick came. So I was named by the Beastie Boys and Grand Royal, shout out to Grand Royal, with that nickname. And from there, I just fell in love with hip-hop.
And it has carried with you through your career.
For my career. And it stayed with me because I just, and listen, the caffeine intake has lowered. Still, listen, it's lowered a little bit, but I still have a lot of energy. And what happened was...
I can tell, but your energy is clearly derived from your passion, because you're so passionately spoken.
Thank you. You could feel it. And I know a like-minded person like you, and that's why I was so attracted to your story. When I read your bio over a year ago, and I said, this is somebody that's going to be around a long time, putting his job and career on the line for new movements and new artists and new things, which you continue to do. And,
thank you.
And with Mike D, he was very similar to our story in the sense of, when he ran his record label, it was an artist-owned record label. And I find my journey from most A&R people that you'll meet were mentored by another A&R person. Mm-hmm. I was mentored by Mike D, so I was mentored by an artist who owned a record label who showed me what an artist is looking for. And what he said was, and sometimes that's a good thing and a bad thing sometimes because they see it only one way.
Well, I understand. I never worked with another A&R. I was the artist turned into A&R.
I know, and I know your writing history as exactly as an artist. So it's like this. Like a lot of the people that work with you know your perspective. And working for Mike was a dream because he taught me A&R. He would ask me to give him mixed notes. He would push me and say, not everything is good. Like, give me your honest opinion. Mm-hmm. How does it make you feel? And these hard conversations with him really set me up to then go on from Grand Royal. Unfortunately, the label folded in the early 2000s, but Mike D stayed a mentor, introduced me to the right people, and I started scouting for DreamWorks Records, which was incredible. Yeah, DreamWorks Records, where Jeff Sosno was an A&R there, and I was a junior under a lot of this incredible regime. And through that journey, I really met a lot of mixers. I worked across the board, across the roster, and it was a dream. And while that was going on, I was also dabbling in beat making. I had an MPC, and I'm a huge.
There it is.
I'm a huge.
There it is.
And just so you know, the artistic side.
I was wondering if it was in there, and that was going to be one of my follow-up questions. Are you a musician of any kind in any capacity?
Exactly. Well, that's where you and I relate. So Mike D. So what happened was, as a kid wanting to write about artists and tell their story, Mike D. One of his big things with me, he said, I want to help push you. Like, if you're going to understand these artists, you gotta tap in.
Yeah.
So I started.
You gotta know what it's like to be one.
Exactly. So I started taking jazz drum lessons. So I took jazz drum lessons. I took music theory classes.
Wow.
And then Mike D bought me my first ever drum machine. It was actually a sampler. It was a Boss DR202.
I love how you remember the exact model.
I never forgot. It was on Christmas.
Yeah.
He gave it to me, and I was so moved. And after that, I became obsessed with buying gear. I have an incredible collection of drum machines. I have a TR-808, an MPC 2000, a 60, a 2000 XL, an MPC 3000.
Do you still get back in the studio and use them anytime?
Every now and again, as much as but my new goal as of this year is to really take that time at night when, instead of watching like a Netflix show,
I've written 4 songs in the last year.
That's what it's tough.
I used to write 4 songs every 2 days.
No, bro, it's tough. No, but you know what? But for us,
you're still creating songs though. On a daily basis, you're A&Ring creating songs.
100%. I just left a studio to come here, and but having that collection because of Mike, he really pushed me. I've done remixes, I've made beats that I've gotten used. But while that was happening, I started really learning from Grand Royal, DreamWorks. Yeah. And then what happened was those 2 first labels, one was sold, one was folded into Interscope. Mm-hmm. And I went and worked for Sony Epic, and it was there where I met Sycamore and a bunch of young A&Rs at the time who were moving around. So when that was going on, I ended up getting courted by Warner Records. And it was there where I caught my biggest success. I went to Warner Records. I got hired by Tom Wally and Craig Aronson. Craig Aronson passed away of brain cancer, and he had signed some of your favorite rock bands in My Chemical Romance, Taking Back Sundays. And when he died, him and Naeem Ali were fantastic A&Rs to learn from and work with. But I had an idea when I went into Warner Records of, I want to sign a producer writer that can really get me in a certain space that maybe I couldn't get in myself. And it was Terrace Martin. My first signing there was Terrace Martin, who is Grammy Award-winning producer. I signed Terrace. Then right after that, I went after Wiz Khalifa, and I was Wiz Khalifa's first ever major label A&R. I had a hit record with him called Say Yeah, which sampled LSDJ, and I did that deal with Benji Grinberg.
Good record.
Yeah, thank you. And a hit record, and I did that with Jennifer Justice. She introduced me, and Benji Grinberg took a liking to me and helped me do that deal. Shout out to Edan and Wiz and Will and everyone on that team. And Wiz changed my life. Working with Wiz Khalifa, you know what happened, and you'll relate to this, it was very similar to your story, kind of getting laughed out of a building. I was fighting for Wiz, and some of the team at that time at Warner said, he doesn't sound like Soulja Boy. He doesn't sound like Crank That on the radio. We need to have him work. You've gone through this.
Same old shit.
Yeah, same old shit.
Yeah.
You know, this kid's from Pittsburgh. No one wants to hear a kid from Pittsburgh. You need to tap him in Atlanta. And Wiz, we were all heartbroken because we had a hit record with Say Yeah. Power 106 was playing it. And unfortunately, and I swear to God, this truly happened. I was called into an A&R meeting, and they said, you bet on the wrong horse. This is not going to win. And they parted ways with Wiz Khalifa.
So wait, this is a real crossroads in your career at this point. So
thank you.
Where do you
get
next?
this. So where I go next, and I love the way we locked eyes right now because you've been there.
Yeah.
There was a minute where I called my father, and I'll trust you. This is probably the first time I've ever said it in an interview. I thought it was over. I was like, you know what? I couldn't have signed anything bigger than Wiz. I knew he was a superstar. We had a gold record. And I said...
But you knew there was so much more there.
I saw him play at a university, 18 years old. He was a fucking superstar.
That's true A&R
Benji
right
knew
there.
That was true A&R.
That's true A&R.
And
you
no
find
bidding
something
war.
from a seed, and you know what kind of forest it can become.
And when the label didn't believe and said, I bet on the wrong horse, as they say, I knew they were wrong. Wiz always knew I believed. I mean, to this day, he sends me texts. I love him. I love Benji. Yeah. And I just was so... And his mother, Peachy, shout out to Peachy, she still stays my friend. That's how wonderful Wiz and his team are, his family. But they knew I believed so hard that I called my dad and I called my mom. I said, it's done. I think I'm gonna maybe see what's next. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I can't work in a system, a major label system. And all of a sudden, I got into music supervision through my mentor, Mike D. He introduced me to his wife, Tamra, who at the time, that was his wife. She's a director. She hired me as a music supervisor. I started syncing music of my friend, like you being a writer, producer. I would call you up and say, hey, my guy, can you send me some beats? And I started doing this for VH1, MTV, a few shows she was working on the side.
Yeah.
Getting back to my roots, making beats myself, saying, I shouldn't cuss, but I just forget all these labels. I'm gonna do this myself and help my friends out. So I started doing music supervision, not even knowing it was music supervision. And while this is happening over the course of a year, Wiz Khalifa gets re-signed to the sister label of Warner Records, which is Atlantic.
Yeah.
Black and Yellow comes out, it explodes. Wiz stays very loyal and close to me. So does Benji, so do his mom and Will. And they're like, you were right. And shout out to Craig Kelman. He took me out to lunch and said, you bet, don't listen to those people that let you and Wiz go. You're a killer, you did your job. Basically the reassurance you just gave me right now, that was true A&R.
Yeah.
If there's anything I could do for you. And I was so moved by such an icon like Craig Kelman telling me that, buying me lunch when he didn't have to. I mean, this is somebody who runs a company.
Yeah.
You've met Craig.
I know Craig,
I know you know him well. And I'm sitting there with him, and it reignited a fuel in me. And I just said, you know what? I'm gonna see what's out there. My attorney at the time, Josh Binder, and still is, Josh Binder's a dear friend of mine. Josh and I were sitting there seeing what was coming our way. And funny enough, a major came my way. And of course, Wiz is buzzing, and they're like, what are you doing? And all of a sudden, I meet Greg Hammer and Red Bull Records. And Greg said, listen, I'm building this thing.
And this guy liked you.
And he liked me as a person. And the funny thing about...
It's hard not to like you, by the way. Yeah,
thank you so much.
You're very personable.
Thank you so much.
And by this time, you've already had, you've already been seasoned, and you've come through the ups and downs.
I know how to make records.
Yeah.
And you get it, man, because you've been doing it independently forever. So Greg looks at me and says, listen, I run this company. We go through the orchard, and we sign 1 to 2 artists a year. So I'm sitting there going, why 1 to 2 artists? And he said, we're about patience and development. And he joked, and he said, I hate the word development because really he does it. I mean, he really does it. They really do it.
It's crazy that a company as big and powerful as Red Bull would want to start a subsidiary that actually focus on development.
Exactly.
It's wild.
And you know, and what it tells you is
because the rest of the business is a fast food factory.
It's moving. The music business.
You sign a 6-option single with a major label.
You've been signed.
You do one. And I've signed deals from my artists. You do one record, doesn't go. You're locked in a deal, or you have to buy yourself out, or hopefully they'll let you go. And it's crazy, which is why the independent. The Orchards and Cobalts and AWOL, and it has all transpired. And I spoke to Kirsten from STEM yesterday as well, and like there's this whole scene, but it's still different. If you're able to bridge, which is what I guess Red Bull Records do, and you'll be able to attest to this, if you're able to bridge the independent strategy with development and passion and patience, true A&R, and then actually have the resources that a major can provide you as far as the financing, it's the winning formula.
You nailed it. And
that's probably what attracted you.
It tied to what Greg said. Greg said, we want to sign artists that make a cultural impact.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of this interview, you might have to edit this part out because Greg will want to give me a shout out. I was the one who said, let's service the artists. We're in the servicing business. That was my quote. But then Greg said, we need to sign culturally impactful artists. Artists that make a cultural impact. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean by cultural impact? He's like, we want to have our own Kendricks, our own artists, and, together with our team, we've signed Beartooth, which we stuck by for 5 albums, 10 records. Mm-hmm. And now he's having his biggest moment. He's going to have a #1 at radio. The Aces, which, like we said, all the way to the Will Turn and even beyond. Blast, which, Chosen was one of your favorite songs of the past few years.
Yeah,
and now he's doing Coachella. And Wonder Girl doing a deal with Tyler Henry, who's also a like-minded person like you, who entrepreneur, loves people. Tyler, we just wanted to be in business with Tyler.
Yeah.
And Wonder Girl's an icon. So
and you find something that you can work on together.
Yeah, and we did that.
That's a relationship.
We did that partnership deal with G, who was a consultant of ours at the time. And when we did the Wonder Girl deal, we wanted to empower a producer to sign artists. Mm-hmm. And together, Wonder Girl and our team, we've signed Chris LaRocca, who performed at the Sing panel today, and Jugger out of Canada. And she's nominated for a Junos. She's already won 2 Junos. So she's incredible. You know what I mean? So,
congratulations.
So like this stuff's moving. But going back to that story, I was so attracted to what Greg said. It was the antithesis of what I went through at the majors. It was artist development to its core. Mm-hmm. So I took the job, and I've been with Greg now and Red Bull Records for 11 and a half years. And I built the A&R team. I hired OBCB, an A&R consultant in the UK.
Well, with Red Bull Records being, its own ship in many ways, you're not having to go through the same procedures as a Warner or a Universal or a Sony is that are public, where public reporting really is the mandate for all of the A&R work. It's how many did you sign? Did you hit the quota? How many hits have we had? How many records have we put out? Okay, we got the top, there's 10 artists we're working on right now. The top 3 stay, the bottom 4, we'll see. And the rest we scrap. And like, it's this,
You're making me laugh because it's so true.
No, but that's true. And I've been in these rooms with these guys.
Of course,
and we sit there and it's great. There's a story, my background. Of
course.
And I've managed to win as a pop idol, The Voice Kids, Eurovision, band members, producers, writers, had a slew of hits, right?
I was about to say, for what you've done in such a truncated window, I mean, you've lived a lifetime as a creative. And I mean that, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's incredible, your journey.
Thank you so much. This story, I'm not going to name the major label.
Okay.
But
I'm interested.
But by the way, I'm friends of the major label, and I want to say we're all friends of the major label.
We all are.
And the major label does great. 99% of the time, they do a good job. But then unfortunately, it's a big 1%. That 1% is fat. It's a fat 1% where it lets you down, and the system lets you down. And sometimes it's ideologies or methodologies that you can't explain. And even myself and a guy like Phil Q, who was the CEO of Warner and EMI and Virgin Records, chairman of the Grammys, Gibson Guitars, Fender, signed the Spice Girls, Rolling Stones, Linkin Park, U2, Red Hot Chili Peppers, you name it, right? So the two of us put together a plan to launch this independent label that focused on artist development, that would release X amount of records every month and X amount on a yearly basis thereof. And we would have this budget for music videos, features, and an entire development and marketing roadmap. And we were going to take on like 6 artists. And so we thought, let's talk to our friends in town. And we have friends in town. And we spoke to one particular major label. And this major label that both you and I know really well, and responded to our email after we had a 4-hour conversation in their office with the presidents of the label saying, okay, great, let's build a plan, let's do this, blah, 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 blah. And we put together the plan and we sent over the plan as per request. And the response that we got was, to me and to Phil Q, was, when you have proof of concept, maybe we can chat about funding the marketing and business plan. And I was like, the former CEO of Warner, Virgin, and EMI, when he has proof of concept running a label, and when I have proof of concept A&Ring hit records, I mean, it's just nuts. And
it's
so
100 number ones under your belt.
Yeah, and what I've realized is that you meet these people and you see them at conferences and conventions, and half the time they like look at you, Stonewall Jackson, because they can't remember who you are, and they go, "Oh, Taylor, how you doing?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was in your office 4 weeks ago, like we had like 4 coffees together, and maybe a Red Bull. You know,
I was gonna say, and maybe a Red Bull.
So what's happening is there's an old guard in the business, and the old guard is facilitating the satisfaction of shareholders and of revenue. And unfortunately, we're missing some of the core artist development. And to hear that Red Bull is focusing on doing that, and under your leadership as far as the A&R and artist development is concerned, is not just refreshing, but it's what the industry actually needs. And I'm grateful to hear that.
What a powerful statement from coming from an executive like you.
Thank you.
I mean, especially,
likewise.
I'm truly, I mean, I feel like we're doing our job if I'm sitting here as the head of A&R being interviewed by you, and you're saying about this company.
Thank you.
Under the A&R side of things, I've overseen this department for over 10 years, and I want to continue to do it. And the beautiful thing is, the brand does do, as we said earlier, does do cool things. It's all about culture.
Yeah.
And from its action sports to whatnot, but even overseeing Red Bull Records, right? When Greg, got asked to start this company, there's 3 studios around the world. Paris, Berlin, LA. We don't charge our artists for that studio. Mm-hmm. That studio is for our artists and friends of Red Bull to use.
We had the same thing.
Exactly. I know you did.
It's part of our job. We have the resources to provide the artists the tools and essentials that they need to succeed. When we sign a development artist, we give them microphones. We sometimes, if an artist doesn't want an advance, we'll give them an advance in plugins and audio and like stuff like that, so that, hey, if you don't want money, cool. You don't want to change the terms of the deal, great. Fine by us. Let's at least give you the resources you need to increase the studio and get monitors and do this. Like, do things that at least help develop the craft.
That's exactly it.
And it's not hard. You're talking a couple of grand for a company like ours or for a company like Red Bull. It's not a big ask. But why doesn't it happen? Where is the generosity in our music business? The music business has turned into executives take. Artists feeling like they're constantly ripped off. Songwriters feeling like they're not making enough money. And then no one doing enough about it.
Yeah, and no one's saying good, and some of these companies say, why don't these artists say good things about their label? And it's like,
yeah, I wonder why.
I wonder because you've been there, you've been on the other side.
Yeah.
Just like, and
then we're in boardrooms with dinosaurs that just like roar all day long and scratch the wood and don't actually make any true meaningful change.
Exactly.
So, and some do, and shout out to the good ones, and there are many of those, of course, but not all.
You've made my wheels turn because it's true. If you look at your pedigree, you've been mentored by some amazing legends, and you've learned the record-making skills from both in the studio and outside of the studio. Yeah. And I've been blessed, from Mike D to Craig Aronson to Naeem to all
I've had the same training.
Exactly, same training with Greg Hammer now. Greg Hammer at Red Bull Records, but also just,
I've never met Greg, by the way. I'd love to meet him. It sounds like we get along.
I think you and Greg will have the same, because think about his challenge as an MD, right? As me as the head of A&R, but him as an MD. I asked my dad, I said, what do you think his job is? Just jokingly. And my dad said it best about Greg. He said, his job is to guard the yard. His job is to keep the lights on by explaining to the brand what Red Bull Records does and how it works and whatnot. And he's been doing it for over 17 years.
Then he is clearly able to articulate the mission and the pace that is relevant to your mission at Red Bull, not the mission of the music industry, but your mission at Red Bull.
Exactly.
And your mission as an A&R and the artists you sign in the development, he's clearly able to articulate that very well and provide the resources and the time that you need to get things across the line. And we know as managers and A&Rs, if you sign a brand new artist from the ground up, it takes 4 years. It takes 4 years to truly break and get them across the line. But you're given one single. You're given one single.
That's what happened to Wiz. They didn't give us enough time. But what even is even better, what you said the other night, 2 nights ago, it was profound. Which Sunday night, you were on stage and you said, there's not enough people like Sat. There's not enough people mentoring.
Shout out to Sat.
Shout out to Sat.
Why we're here.
Yeah. But you said that on stage. I think it was just very innocent. You were moving. You had a couple of people kind of pulling you, and you said, just innocently, I thought it was so pure the way it just came out of your mouth. You said, shout out to people who just want to see people win and mentor. There's not enough of you in the business.
Yeah.
And I was so moved by that because we didn't have, people like you and I didn't have enough people helping us, right?
And we realized how grateful we were to at least have the few.
I have the few. And, and that's why at this stage of our careers, I see how you treat your staff. I've seen it, how you treat your team. Same here. When I brought in Charles C.B. Burks III, I love him, Obi. I have an incredible team, Rob, who we just hired on A&R admin. I have these 3 amazing execs on my team that every day I wake up and I say, what can I do to help them? And that wasn't always the case, 10, 15 years ago. But you wake up and you start feeling that way. And you're in the shower, and you come out of the shower, you get ready for work, and you're doing your thing, and you're driving to work, right? You're in your routine, and you think about people other than yourself, and it's so moving.
I can relate to this.
Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
And you think, I wonder what CB thinks. I wonder what Obi thinks. And you want to make them proud, but you also want them to have the confidence to go further than what you even think for them. Does that make sense?
But that's our jobs.
That's our jobs.
It's our job as the enhancers behind the scenes to try and provide the platform and the advice and the guidance and
100%.
and tunnel vision when it's needed, but a wider lens when it's needed, and just to protect. And to facilitate is our jobs as managers, A&Rs, music executives behind these creatives. And it's honestly really telling to your personal self-development when you get to a place where you're able to recognize when to switch on leadership, when to switch on the creative, when to step out and it's not your place to be creative, and when to actually hone in with your opinion. And if you have that kind of a mental and emotional maturity and the sensibilities to know when to and when to not is really, really telling. And
you get it.
Again,
you get it. I mean,
it's far and few between.
It's far, what's funny? I was in the studio.
Most are trained to say no. Most A&R executives and most development executives they're hired to say no.
You know what? They're hired to say no, but I was in the studio with different artists, Blast, Aces, Beartooth.
Yeah.
And they're all such unique artists. But there were moments, right, where we're in the studio, and you would totally relate to this, where they're all powerful artists. They all write their own music. They all collaborate. And there were moments where...
strong opinions in the room.
Strong opinions in the room.
Yeah.
And when they're very powerful individuals. But when I was in there, and there was a minute where I was confiding in one of my members on the A&R team, and I said, I don't want to be, and we can't be that team that touches it just to touch it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just gotta step back, and thank you so much. I almost got emotional saying that.
Yeah.
It hit me hard, even just thinking that. And they looked at me and they were like, "You're right." I said, "We cannot touch it just to," and you know this from writing music. How many A&Rs leaned over and said, "Taylor, let me just touch a few things." And you're like, "Why, mate? It's perfect."
But the thing is, they're not even musically trained enough to give the right feedback.
No.
Something's wrong with this. Something's not quite right with the post. And it's like, how about change the melody here? I want the cadence of the drums to change. Roll off 2,000 hertz because it's too high-ended. Like, how about some musical training for once?
Yeah. Give me some musicality. Give me
some musicality.
Yeah.
We do exactly the same thing at THC Publishing. It's one of the things that our writers love about us, at least I think.
I'm sure
since this is going to be public. But, Michael Mancuso, our A&R manager, who's fantastic at his job, and also musically and classically vocally trained. And myself, producer, writer, and even Leanne, who's an A&R who just joined our team. She went to Berkeley for production. So we're all we're musical people. And we actually tell our writers, they FaceTime us when we're in the studio to run a melody by us. Hey, what do you think of this? Do you think it's in the right direction? Does it fit the brief? Yes. If it's great, have at it. If they need feedback, we give them feedback. We can sing lines to them. We can propose ideas. But here's the kicker: is that we never ever ask for music publishing if we provide an idea. So touch it to touch it or not. But if it needs to be touched and you're improving the record, you're not taking from your artist, because we're compensated on a salary, and as a music publisher already, that's all they have. So we can provide ideas, and we can enhance the record and build it, but we don't go and say, oh, by the way, I gave you a couple of ideas on a FaceTime call, or when I walked into the studio as an A&R, I said, oh, actually, I think that I want to hear more of a tremolo on the synth at the end, and I want to hear a different drum pattern, and we should go minor here, and or even sung a melody that, by the way, that's 2.5% for me on the split sheet by the time you receive it in your inbox, because that's blasphemy.
Yeah. But how pure and at any other company, right? You've heard the
your job's to protect the creative and to enhance the creative, not to steal from the creative.
That's it. And I think we have to be doing more business, my brother.
I think so.
You're such a kindred spirit. It's the truth. I've heard the horror stories of the people working at the labels touching it just to touch it and then asking for credit, which that could get extremely blurry and dangerous. And actually,
touching it to touch it sounds like rape to me.
Right? You know what? We can edit that out, but that's real. It's you know what? I look down because you think about that. It goes back to even before our times as A&Rs and creatives. From the beginning of time, you've heard of executives, / producers going into a room, maybe even changing a kick or a hi-hat. And all of a sudden
produced by me.
and then some people, I've seen some people turn it around where maybe they did do those things and realized how wrong it was and changed their trajectory. I mean, listen, I think we're in it for the right reasons. I meant to hear your journey.
We're in it for the right reasons.
And we're in it for the right reasons. And
heart's in the right place. Soul is healthy.
Soul is healthy. And we could both wake up and look at ourselves in the mirror.
And feel good.
And know we're helping these artists.
Yeah.
So now I appreciate this interview.
I have loved it.
This was honestly my favorite. I haven't done something like this in a long time, and I've said things I probably haven't said to anyone in an interview. So I was honored.
I haven't been as candid about some of the music business.
I could tell I pulled something out of you too, because you wanted it to be.
We'll see whether it does justice for our careers or not.
Mate, let's my brother, let's stay close, and I appreciate this conversation.
Thank you, Kenny.
Honored.
Thank you, Tick.
Honored,
Let's go, dude.
Let's go.
Thanks.
Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, follow the Spotify page, and stay tuned for the next episode of Executives in Discussion on the A&R Worldwide podcast presented by Nuplak with your host, Taylor Jones. See you next time.